We will call this Committee of Adjustment hearing to order. Just before we get started this evening, I'm just going to go over the committee's or the hearings protocols this evening. We have a bunch of applications for 3 different properties that we'll be hearing this evening. Just before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping, not that we have a big crowd here tonight, but cell phones, if you can please place them on mute or on silent mode. And if asking any questions on a particular application, if you can address them through the chair and not directly to the person being asked. The first order of business will be to ask any committee members if they have any conflicts of interest with any of the applications this evening, followed any requests of deferrals or withdrawals of applications by applicants. The committee's secretary-treasurer will then read out each application noted on the agenda with a brief description and staff recommendation. The agent or the applicant the applicant or the agent for the applicant will be asked to come forward. They can go to the podium on the right if they're here, or we will bring them into meeting if they're joining us remotely. They will be allowed a short overview to explain any further details they wish to add at that time. Members of the committee will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public who wish to speak to this application. Any members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address, try to limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present all questions and comments that are pertinent to the application in that time frame. Persons making a presentation may not necessarily be allowed to return to speak to the same application again. In the case where we have multiple applications for each property, that 10 minutes will be extended to the property, not necessarily to each application. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if desired. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, the motion will be defeated and a new motion will be made. Motions that are defeated will require new motions to be made until we have a decision reached. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons who leave their name and addresses with the secretary treasurer in writing. For those here, there's a sign-in page at the back for that purpose. For anyone that's joining online that wishes to receive that, they can email Samantha Young at samantha.yeung@portcolborne.com, or they can call 905-835-2600 extension 204 immediately following the meeting and leave a message there. It is also noted that in order to be kept advised of any possible local planning appeal tribunal hearings, persons must request and be sent a copy of the committee's decision on an application. So with that, that's the process. I will ask if there's any conflicts of interest with any of the applications this evening. Will we be able to see anyone on? All right. So Angie and Donna, you're joining us remotely. Neither have any conflicts?
None here.
Okay.
This is in speaker view right now, so when they talk, they'll come up.
Okay. Thank you. And with that, has there been any requests for deferrals of applications by applicants? Not seeing any. So with that, Madam Secretary, the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our first application for tonight is B13-22-PC in the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP13 Section 53(1), and in the matter of the lands legally known as Lot 71 on Plan 59M428 in the city of Port Colborne, located in the second density residential R2 zone, municipally known as 675 and 677 Stanley Street. And in the matter of an application by the owner Bridge and Quarry Limited for consent for the purpose of creating a new lot, the subject parcels are shown as Part 1 and Part 2 on the sketch submitted. Part 1 is proposed to be the severed parcel, and Part 2 is the retained parcel to accommodate a semi-detached dwelling on both parcels. A notice was circulated to the public on August 30th and required agencies on August 19th, 2022. As of today, the following comments have been received. The fire department has no objection to the proposed application. The drainage superintendent has no objection. Engineering notes the driveway entrance must be a minimum of 3 meters and a maximum of 7.3 meters. And please note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and the applicants. A copy is also available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. Given the information in the planning report, planning staff recommend application B13-22-PC be granted subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. 2, that a final certification fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, that all conditions of consent be completed by September 14th, 2024. For the following reasons: 1, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, the City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575-30-18 as amended. And that concludes the correspondence of this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here or online?
He's online.
Okay. I think your microphone is on mute.
He's muted now.
Still can't hear you. Technology's great when it works.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
How's everybody?
Very good. If I might, just your name for the...
My name's Jeff Collins.
Jeff Collins, perfect.
I'm the president of Bridge and Quarry, co-owner.
Very good. Is there anything you'd like to add in addition to what's already been read off?
No, not at all.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the applicant this evening?
I have a curious question about it.
Sure.
The fact this was draft plan approved and all that, and then we had a permit given for the semis. We're just, we're curious why this wasn't told that we had to provide severance for that. What would happen if public said, no, we're not gonna allow this, and we've already got a permit in hand and the house already built? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I guess with
This was
regards to the
draft plan approved
public...
and all that. I know we have to make 2 different parcels of land.
Right.
I'm just curious if public said, no, we object and appeal it, and we're already built with permission.
I guess in that particular case, you may get stuck, but as far as I know, this one is pretty straightforward since there's no other variances, and I believe there is provision directly in the zoning bylaw that says if it's a semi-detached, it can automatically be split. You just got to go
Okay.
through the process of coming to this committee for that to happen.
Okay.
But yes,
Yeah, I was
guess-
just curious about that.
Yeah, at the time of building application, I guess that could have been discussed.
Yeah.
If
We know now going through it, but it was just curious, right? Because we're coming
Yeah.
close and our surveyor pointed it out to us. And
Yeah,
all good now, but I was just curious.
yeah. So with
No
that,
other questions though.
okay, thank you. Gary,
Through you to Chris. Chris, so,
microphone.
sorry. So, Chris, when a subdivision's built and lots are designed, I thought maybe the reason was that you don't know what's going on there. But once you do, is the reason also to have this now because maybe measurements can't be perfectly ascertained at the time, or why is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Bruno, you're kind of close there. When when these lots are draft plan approved, if we created these lots that were 200 square meters in size for the purpose of only a semi-detached dwelling, we kind of restrict ourselves. The zoning of the property is R2, which permits a detached dwelling, a duplex, or a semi-detached dwelling. So either three of those uses could go in there. We're not going to create lots that are specifically for one purpose.
Okay.
Even though our R1 zone does
Okay.
technically have that, but it kind of limits ourselves. In the future, I think we'll probably be using part lot control to be severing a lot of these because they're just quick and easy. And again, our bylaw, like the chair alluded to, it's worded in such a way that provides for this type of
Okay.
application.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Donna, sorry, you have your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, it's for David. I guess when I looked at this, I kind of wondered if it was because we thought that perhaps there's a chance that someone would keep these semis and just rent them out rather than sell them. In that instance, would someone just keep it as a full lot and they would rent the two pieces out? I thought maybe that was the initial intention and they decided to sever them and sell them. Does that happen?
I'm not sure, was that a question to a specific staff member or?
Well, I'm sorry, I should have said to David again. I just, like I said, that was what I kind of thought. I thought, oh, perhaps it's being done this way because, you know, initially they were going to be rented and the owner, Mr. Collins, was going to retain ownership and rent them or something along that line. I wasn't sure. Does that happen, David, or is it strictly?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's another reason as well. I should have mentioned that too. The owner can retain both the units and rent them out, or live in one, rent the other one. So he's under no obligation to sever them.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I actually went through this in Welland, where one of the developments, they put the foundation in, and but they went through the severance. So essentially, yeah, it's really just about ownership, right? So there'll just be one owner instead of two, and then there'll still be two units. It's just ownership over the entire lot. And sometimes doing it this way also helps for when you do a reference, you can do a reference plan when there's a foundation in, and it gives you the exact measurements of where the common wall is.
Thank you. Any other questions? To the applicant.
Yeah, we do have a 6 block of townhouses that we're currently building. We're halfway done framing it. I'd imagine we'd be doing the same thing. We're not looking to rent any of the properties. We really like the location in there, and we you know, rental properties kind of lower the value sometimes on it, so we want to keep them as primary owners for it. But we do have a 6 block and a 7 block coming up in townhouses, so I imagine we're going to have to do the same thing or something similar, because we're going to have to sever 13 lots out of these. So we will be looking to start that process sooner than later too.
Okay. Eric,
I'd like to make a motion.
just before you get to that. And there's no other delegations. You're not here to speak to this application?
No.
Okay. And there's no other online delegation. So with that, Eric.
That in application B 13-22-PC, the lands legally known as Lot 71 on Plan 59M 428, known as 675 and 677 Stanley Street. The consent application B 13-22-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 9, 2022. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seconder to that. Angie, questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. There is a 20-day waiting period, just so you know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready with the next bunch of applications.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So our next applications are B14-22-PC, A23-22-PC, and A24-22-PC. In the matter of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, Section 53(1), and Section 6.3 A, C, D, and E of the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And in the matter of the lands legally known as Lot 7 on NP 843 in the City of Port Colborne, located in the 3rd Density Residential Zone, municipally known as 134 Fairs Street. And in the matter of an application by the owner Brenton Lundy for consent for the purpose of creating a new lot. The subject parcels are shown as Part 1 and Part 2 on the sketch submitted. Part 1 is proposed to be the severed parcel for future residential use, and Part 2 is the retained parcel to accommodate the existing dwelling. And in the matter of an application for relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended, so as to permit future residential development on Part 1, notwithstanding the following. 1, that a minimum lot frontage of 10.36 meters be permitted, whereas 12 meters is required. And for relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended, so as to permit the existing dwelling on Part 2, notwithstanding the following. 1, that a minimum lot frontage of 9.91 meters be permitted, whereas 12 meters is required. 2, that a minimum front yard setback of 4.69 meters be permitted, whereas 6.5 meters is required. 3, that a minimum side yard setback of 0.27 meters be permitted, whereas 1 meter is required. 4, that a minimum lot area of 393.76 meters squared be permitted, whereas 400 meters squared is required. A notice was circulated to the public on August 30th and required agencies on August 19th, 2022. As of today, the following comments have been received. The drainage superintendent has no objection to the application. The fire department has no objection to the proposed application. Engineering notes the required width and recommends a topographic survey be completed to ensure each lot can drain independently. Please note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and the applicant. A copy is available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. Given the information in the planning report, planning staff recommend application B14-22-PC be granted, subject to the following conditions. That 1, the applicant provides the secretary treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel, or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. 2, that a final certification fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the secretary treasurer. 3, that the existing detached garage be removed. 4, that minor variance applications A23-22-PC and A24-22-PC be granted. 5, that the applicants sign the City of Port Colborne's standard memorandum of understanding explaining the development charges in cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes based on an appraisal at the expense of the applicant, wherein the value of the land is to be determined as of the day before the issuance of a building permit is required prior to the issuance of a building permit pursuant to Section 42 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended. 6, that all conditions of consent be completed by September 14th, 2024. For the following reasons. 1, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And that the minor variance application A23-22-BC be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature, as the requested minor variances are minor in nature and the dwelling can meet most of the zoning requirements. Two, it is appropriate for development of the site, as the existing dwelling is located in a suitable location and detached dwellings are permitted use in the R3 zone. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits detached dwellings in the R3 zone, and the proposal meets the majority of the setback and lot coverage requirements. Four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as residential dwellings in the medium density urban neighborhood designation of the East Waterfront Secondary Plan area. And that a minor variance application A24-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature, as the reduction in lot frontage will not negatively impact the subject parcel. Two, it is appropriate for development of the site, as the proposed lot frontage can accommodate a detached dwelling while meeting the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits detached dwellings in the R3 zone and the proposal meets majority of the lot creation requirements. And four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and the purpose of the official plan, as residential buildings, dwellings in the medium density urban neighborhood designation of the East Waterfront Secondary Plan area. And that concludes the correspondence of this application.
Thank you. The applicant online again.
He's here.
Hello. Hi there. Sorry.
Hello.
Good.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Excellent. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Is there any questions of the applicant this evening? Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. In the application, it just says future residential use. What is the proposed, like, do you have a proposed land use for it other than just general residential? Like, is it going to be a single detached, or what is it that you're looking at doing?
If I can get the funding, I would like to do a raised bungalow, garage attached. So just skinny and long.
Okay. And, okay, that's all my questions for you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Angie, Donna, Sherry? Not seeing any. Angie?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I would actually like to ask a question. I believe this may be more of staff than of the applicant, but it seems that there was a comment made by engineering with respect to drainage. Has that been addressed at all? Maybe David should answer that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just pulling up the comment now. I want to refresh.
Because it is an area with drainage issues already, so I just want to make sure that that's addressed.
Yeah, it was the requirement for a topographic survey. It was only a recommendation at that point. They weren't making it an actual requirement to the severance. But drainage issues are always dealt with at the time of the building permit anyway, so they would have to submit a lot grading plan, and they would have to be to code before they can acquire their building permit.
Okay, so at that point, would this particular survey be required at that point, or would there just be an opinion of the drainage done?
It would likely be required at that point.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions of this application? Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not to the applicant, but to staff. So this topic has come up a couple times regarding topographic surveys in terms of drainage. And in my experience, it's typically a condition in a lot of other municipalities that a drainage plan, at least conceptually, be provided as a condition. And I think it does make sense to do it for one reason. If you can't get drainage to work, then there's no point of them going to building and finding out then, because then they've wasted how much money on getting this done to then go to building and not being able to get the permit. So I think in the future it may be beneficial to the applicants to have to submit a drainage plan, at least conceptually, to the satisfaction of engineering or public works in our circumstances.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's always something we can look into. It's also, if you'd like, something that the committee can add as a condition as well.
Okay.
Yes.
And also another issue, and I'm not sure when this goes to engineering and is circulated, do they comment on potential laterals crossing property lines?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to follow up with engineering to see what they do with their review. To my recollection, I don't believe it's ever come up in any of their reviews. I would have to think back, though.
Okay. Because again, in some other municipalities, it's a common condition to have that applicants provide, they get a private locate completed to ensure that lateral sewer and water do not cross the property line, and if they do, that they are obligated to remove those laterals and install new ones that conform with that don't cross the lines. So again, I don't know if those could be like standard conditions or something that we should add in. I think I'm more open to the topographic survey at this point, but in the future, maybe we should look into that.
And if I might, just for that, you mean for the existing dwelling, when there's an existing dwelling? Just in case they go kind of on a weird angle across?
Yeah, typically like in lots, especially this type of very older neighborhoods, typically when servicing was completed, they can be quite wonky. There was a property in St. Catharines where the laterals actually went through the rear of the property through another yard in Port Dalhousie. So I'm not sure what it's like here, but it is possible that there could be issues with laterals.
Anyone else got any questions? Angie, do you got your...
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Dan. Just to Eric's point, with the work the infrastructure work that was done in that area of town in the last couple of years, I think that some of those lateral issues were found and were corrected, and that area in particular, there were a few. So I'm thinking we might be okay there, but I would agree with you, Eric, that topographical survey is probably something we should be adding.
I think the dog agrees.
It wasn't mine, I swear.
So with that, is there any other questions of the applicant? Sir, were you here for this one? Okay. And we don't have any other requests for electronic delegation. So with that, I don't know if the applicant wants to provide any other further comments before we move a motion.
I have no other comments at this time.
Thank you. So I'll look for someone to make a recommendation. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the B1422, the consent, the land's legally known as Lot 7 on NP 843, known as 134 Ferris Street. The consent application B1422 PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 9th, 2022. For the following reasons. One, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a second to that? Eric? questions or comments? Eric?
Can I make a motion to amend the motion? Okay. I'd like to add a condition that a lot grading plan, conceptual lot grading plan be, that the applicant provide a lot grading plan showing that a proper drainage to the satisfaction of Public Works. There.
No, I just have a concern or question. Sorry.
Do you have a seconder to his motion?
Sure. To get on the floor? Sure. I'm only concerned that every time somebody comes for a building permit in the city of Port Colborne on a lot to build, has to have that as part of the building permit process. So don't you also have to know, notwithstanding you're putting it out into the future, it will be dependent on what he builds and the design, right? As to the lot grading plan, like the impervious roof and all that, the lot grading plan. So, like, are we asking for something that's mandatory already? Through you to Chris.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In a word, yes, you are asking for something that is going to be required later on, but I think to Eric's point is that he wanted to ensure that the lots do drain independently before they're officially created.
Okay.
However, it is a requirement of the building permit. You are correct.
Okay. Well, based on your first half, I'm fine then, having heard that.
Thank you. Any other questions to the additional motion for the condition? All those in favor to add it? That'll be added. And then back to the original motion with the amendment. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. To the applicant, there is a 20-day waiting period, but other than that, you're free to proceed after that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
That was just. Excuse me, Chair, was that, well, I thought that was only the severance that we just dealt with.
You are correct.
I wanted to vote on the consent.
Sorry. Anyway, is the applicant still there?
He left. Nope, he's still here.
Okay.
He's here.
If you can bring
Okay.
it up. Sorry, we jumped
Excuse
ahead
me
of.
there.
Usually we do them all together, and this one, because of the extra, it was done separately. So, sorry, with, has someone got a recommendation for the two variances?
I'd be happy
Angie?
to move those. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm happy to move those. And can I do them together or should I do them separately?
You could do them together if you like.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about application A2322-PC and A2422-PC. Lands legally known as Lot 7 on NP 843, municipally known as 134 Ferris Street. That the minor variance applications A23 and 24-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature, and as the requested variances are minor in nature, and the dwelling can meet most of the zoning requirements. Two, it is appropriate for the development of the site, and as the existing dwelling is located in a suitable location and detached dwellings are permitted use in the R3 zone. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as the zoning bylaw permits detached dwellings in the R3 zone, and proposal meets the majority of the setback and lot coverage requirements. Four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as residential dwellings in the medium density urban neighborhood designation of the East Village, of the East Waterfront secondary plan area. There you go.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Eric? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Okay, now I think we're done with your.
Now we're done.
Sorry about that.
Better.
And Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready for the next property, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So our next application covers 6 applications. So we have B15-22-PC, B16-22-PC, B17-22-PC, B18-22-PC, A25-22-PC, and A26-22-PC. In the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990, CP 13, Section 53, 1, and the Section 8.6B of the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And in the matter of the lands legally known as Plan 3 on lots 17, 18, 21 to 31 in the City of Port Colborne, located in the 4th Density Residential Zone, municipally known as 59 Elmer Avenue. And in the matter of an application by the agent Brian Miller on behalf of the owner Wesley Visser for consent for the purpose of creating a new lot, or creating new lots. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1 to 5 on the sketch submitted. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 are proposed to be severed parcels to accommodate 1 unit on each lot of the existing townhouse. Part 5 will be retained for future development. And in the matter of an application for relief for provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended, so as to permit residential use on Part 2 and Part 3, notwithstanding the following: that one, that a minimum lot area of 177.9 meters squared be permitted, whereas 200 meters squared is required for both lots. So 6 notices were circulated to the public on August 30th and required agencies on August 19th, 2022. As of today, the following comments have been received. The fire department has no objection to the application. The drainage superintendent has no objection to the application. Engineering comments a mutual agreement drain must be registered on title to ensure the continued operation and maintenance of the rear yard swell. Colin Warner, a member of the public, submitted comments regarding the planning process for the development, congestion in and surrounding the neighborhood, and adequate parking availability in the neighborhood. Note that these comments were summarized for the purpose of this meeting, but a full copy has been sent to the committee and applicant. A copy is also available for members of the public by contacting the planning department. Given the information in the planning report, planning staff recommend applications B15-22-PC, B16-22-PC, B17-22-PC, and B18-22-PC be granted subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. 2, that a final certification fee of $216 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, that a mutual agreement drain be registered on title that ensures the continued operation and maintenance of the rear yard swell. 4, that minor variance applications A 25-22-PC and A 26-22-PC be granted for the applications B16-22-PC and B17-22-PC. 5, that the applicants sign the City of Port Colborne Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining that development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes based on an appraisal at the expense of the applicant, wherein the value of the land is to be determined as of the day before the issuance of a building permit, is required prior to the issuance of a building permit pursuant to Section 42 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended. This condition only applies to Part 5. 6, that all conditions of consent be completed by September by September 14th to 2024. For the following reasons: one, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575/3018 as amended. And that a minor variance application for a 25-22-PC and a 26-22-PC be granted for the following reasons. One, the application is minor in nature as the reduction in lot area will not negatively impact the subject parcel. Two, it is appropriate for development of the site as a dwelling is currently existing and the severance is being sought to facilitate the sale of each townhouse unit. Three, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw as the zoning bylaw permits townhouse dwellings in the R4 zone. The proposal meets the majority of the lot creation requirements and the existing dwelling will meet all the required setbacks. Four, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning of the official plan as townhouse dwellings are permitted in the urban residential designation. And that concludes the correspondence of all these applications.
Thank you. The applicant for this
He's
particular,
online.
okay.
Can I just ask a process question first before we get into the specifics?
Let's just bring him in first and then we can.
Okay. It's not of the applicant, to be of the planner. Okay.
There you go. Oh, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
There we are. I think we're live.
We are. So just before you get started, Member Bruno does have a question with regards to process, just before you get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Chris. Chris, when I was just wondering why, if you have 4 consents, and this is very similar to the first application, right? They're all co-joined. Wouldn't we need a variance for each one? Like there's 4 consents and 2 variances. So I'm just wondering why that is.
Right, through you, Mr. Chair, the variances are only for 2 of the lots because they are technically smaller than the other 2, so parts 2 and 3. The ones on the inside, they're smaller.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so the variance doesn't have to be done first, so that then you can create.
No, as long as it's included in the conditions of the severance that they are approved, it doesn't really matter where they go in the order.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the applicant. Is there anything you'd like to add at this time?
I think just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, first of all, we would certainly endorse the comments of planning staff and the conditions requested are appropriate for this development. A couple of things I can add also that I think that might be helpful is with respect to drainage, a complete stormwater management plan was provided for this property at the time the building permits were issued, and it will complement also the drainage plan and stormwater management for the balance of the development of this site on the Sherwood Forest side of the property. That's all been anticipated and is under design. Secondly, similar to the first application, these applications were not brought until the foundations were in place so that accurate demising lines could be created between the various parcels. So there is a structure on the property under building permit, complies with the zoning bylaw, but was constructed prior to the severances in order that accurate property lines would be available, and that was done completely with the consent of and the blessing of the town staff, who have been extremely helpful with all of these applications. With respect to the minor variances, I would just point out that is a matter of lot area, but it does not affect either setback on the front, which provides 2 parking spots rather than the one. So there's an additional parking spot there. And the rear amenity area is not affected as well. It's the same rear yard setback as the balance of the units. With respect to the variances, I agree 100% with the town staff that they meet the 4 tests under Section 45 of the Planning Act, and that the severance applications comply with all the relevant planning documents from the provincial policy statement down through to the local zoning bylaws. Mr. Chairman, those are my comments, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions of the applicant? Not seeing any. I do have a question, and maybe this has changed, but through you to Chris. I thought in the past when we severed lots, we were only allowed to sever 3. Now, I realize this is a townhouse, and it'd be kind of hard to just not sever all of them. Is there a change when you get to a townhouse? Because earlier on, we also heard that a potential property coming up with even more for townhouses. So I was just wondering,
Right, yeah, to you, Mr. Chair. There is a provision in our official plan. I think it states something about a plan of subdivision for creating 3 or more lots. For townhouses, I don't think this applies. Again, the building's already existing. I alluded to it earlier, we can also bring them through part lot control, which I think is probably what we're going to end up doing for those other townhouses that were mentioned before. Just an easier process for doing things like this that don't, it's not as contentious most of the time.
Thank you. So with that being said, I don't have anything further. If no one else has anything further.
I'm here on this matter.
All right, we have a member here a member of the public here to speak to this. So if you want to come up to the front on the side there, there's a little bar that's in the front there. You'll see a little red button in the middle. If you could just push that, that'll turn on the microphone and your name and address for the record.
Yes.
Yep.
On this thing here.
Can we wait till
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Address for the record.
My name is Colin Warner. I live at 63 Omer Avenue. My concern as a resident on this development as further development. I get it, yes, the owner has provided 2 parking spots. But as a person that owns a house with a garage, and I have 3 vehicles in my driveway, not a single vehicle gets parked in my garage. For the simple fact is it's storage, excess storage. Now, yes, they have provided 2 parking spots. But as these small units, my concern, Omer Avenue is a narrow street, very narrow. Even come wintertime, which was part of my question. The plow goes down our street. The plow, when he drops his blade down, he plows 3/4 of the road in one pass. That's how small it is. Now, if these owners, as this development goes through, 2 or more cars, most families have 2 cars, if not more. I have 3. Now, if their garage is full of stuff, they have 1 parking spot on the street. Then they turn around, where's the other car going to park? They're going to park on the street, or in the driveway, 1 on the street. So that becomes my concern on that. Now, these people start parking on the street. There's a lot of people that use Omer Avenue because of Port Colborne's trail down through Dane City and coming up downtown here. Now, a statement was made I got a response back. Let's see, in a less consistent lot for size, I'm making the lot size smaller. Aesthetically appeasing, my lot is 66 or 88 deep, which is my lot. Now, as this developer wants to go on, if you look at the plan, you got Garlinda Street. This developer wants to add more units right down Omer Avenue, which goes to the house just to the east of it. Now, that lot is even deeper than mine. So as far as a statement as being aesthetically appeasing for the neighborhood, to make the lot to the legal size that is required for the city of Port Colborne, it does not matter, because my lot is not as deep as the far one. So as he goes down farther, the lot is not going to be as deep as the far one. So aesthetically, there's still going to be a jog in there, and that. I look at it as this development went through, and from what I've heard, statements have been made as the neighborhood and what I've understood, This initial plan was to build this development, sever the lots and sell them as townhouse complex, original plan. So is this, put it through, no, we're not going to sever it, we're going to leave it as one unit. So is this ask for forgiveness later instead of ask for the proper logistics kind of deal? That might be overstepping my comments on that, I get that. But I have these concerns. Yes, they can make it deeper. That way these homeowners, instead of putting their lawn furniture, lawn equipment, anything like that in the garage, if they want to build a shed, are their lots big enough to build a shed to put that extra storage for their outside stuff in that aspect? Especially on the 2 center units, which I understand that's why he wants a smaller lot size. The end lots are okay, and I have had a major concern, which I've dealt with the city about, on drainage. Since this development was started, my lot has done nothing but flood because for some reason, the gentleman was told that he had to raise the property. So this gentleman dug a pond at his own property and trucked in all this dirt and raised his property up probably about 18 inches. And over the past 2 years, I believe, since the gentleman has owned it, before the development started, all that water drained to my place. To around, my pool is flooded out, and my request on this is, what's the further damage to the residents in this neighborhood as this man puts this development? He's been working on this development for a year. He wants to put up to almost 30 units on this chunk of property. And I get it, it's good for development for the city of Port Colborne. I do understand that. I've worked construction my entire life. I get development. But what about the residents in this neighborhood? This developer has built 4 townhouses, and it's taken them a year to build it. I delivered downtown Toronto. They built 60-story high-rises in 18 months. So what's the long-term effects to the neighbors in this, as this statement? There's a lot more. I've heard some stuff, a gentleman over there stated some stuff on drainage, topical drainage and all that stuff. Why does the developer not have to put that proper drainage in before he starts destroying the property so the water properly runs away from the neighbors that are existing there? And retaining walls when he builds his basement. I have long-term of conditions with my garage because when this developer dug his basement, the whole entire bank collapsed against my property. It was barely a foot away from my garage as it caved in. They done nothing to shore it back. The only thing this developer done was put a little retaining wall to protect his footing so he could do the rest of his work. My bank caved in. I got pictures of fence posts, my fence being destroyed. I'm looking 4 feet down in the ground on the concrete post on my property because this gentleman did not look after the further effects on what it causes to the neighbors. And that's my biggest concern as a resident in this neighbor, is the neglect this developer has taken to this statement. I've been threatened by this developer, and these are my concerns as a neighbor in this town. And I've been threatened by this man. This man has literally put his construction equipment on my property, and I've literally, why can't you come and ask me? I go to work, my wife leaves, he's on my property. All he had to do was knock on my door and say, hey, I need to do this part on my property. Would you mind if I accessed it through this? He didn't even have the decency to come to me on this aspect. So my request to the city is there more restrictions you can do to ensure the safety and protection of the neighbors in this area because of this developer? I don't know if there's anything else I can state on it. And I hear that Sherwood Forest, yes, that's further development. You would have to assess the development on that at further dates in that. A developer is going to put a whole string of townhouses down that street. I know this is further down, is what happens to the old Robin Hood truck traffic? Are those new people going to make complaints to you as a city about the truck traffic? What happens to Robin Hood and the restrictions to them to run their business as this development goes on down the road in that concern? So at this present time, that's about all I can think of as making my statement as a resident in this neighborhood. So I think I highlighted as best as I could in my questions on paper that I emailed to you anyways. I don't know, you guys have any questions for me, or?
No, I think
I think that's about it for me, is what I can think of right now as a statement.
very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me go to Eric. Did you have a question first? And I'll come back.
I would like to hear staff's response, or the applicant's response, I guess, to the. You don't have to bother asking me, Mr. Chair. That was my question. Yeah, and then I'll ask my questions afterwards.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think I tried my best to provide a response in the report for a lot of those concerns. With respect to the lot area, the property still meets all the required setbacks. I know the delegate had mentioned something about putting sheds in the backyard. The rear yard setback requirement is there for that exact purpose, and they're meeting that requirement. So in staff size, there's really no major issues there. And kind of further to that, the mutual agreement drain does actually kind of restrict the use of that back portion of the yard, strictly just for drainage purposes, but that's another story. In terms of lot drainage, a lot grading plan was submitted for the entire lot. Of course, it's part of a building permit application, and this is an existing structure, so a lot grading plan was submitted and it was signed. I am no expert in lot drainage or reviewing grading plans, so we'd have to talk to engineering staff to see if there's any changes that can be made to the grading plan, the existing grading plan. I'm not even sure how that process goes because it is stamped and signed by a member of staff here. So if drainage problems are persisting, then it's the lot grading plan that we would need to review. But unfortunately, it has been stamped, signed, approved. So it's kind of this is the situation that we're in now.
Eric, did that address your? Do you want to go? Okay. Fire away.
Through Mr. Chair to Chris. So one of the recommendations of this report is that in lieu of parkland dedication, payment be made only for Part 5. Why is it only Part 5?
Through you, Mr. Chair, because the development is existing, parkland dedication is required at the time of building permits, so should have already been paid. And then Part 5 is just to let them know that in the future they're going to need to pay parkland dedication on this vacant lot.
Sorry, so they should have already paid some for the other lots?
Because the building's already existing, yeah. You can't really come back and ask them for parkland dedication on a building that already exists, right?
Okay. Okay, I'll ask another question, but it'll be at other business. The other one is, this seems to be quite, the development was, planning justification report not necessarily required a pre-con for this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, because when you really boil this down, it is just a simple severance of an existing townhouse. Planning justification report, not really something that's required for severing existing structure, right?
Okay. That's good.
Thank you. Gary?
Chris, so this whole area is under draft plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no.
So the balance of that property on Sherwood Forest and on Omer will then either have to have a draft plan if it's the balance of the rest, or the developer can go one group of townhouses at a time?
That's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. That's if the developer chooses to do it piece by piece, as long as they don't trigger that requirement for a plan of subdivision or site plan control or whatever it might be, then it's not required. So in this example, 4 townhouse units doesn't trigger site plan control because it's not a part of a registered plan, and it's 5 or less units.
So the other question about drainage, so we don't know, but if the developer continues to do townhouses or he does something else, each parcel would then have to integrate with this current one? So this current one has a drainage plan, and the drainage plan's been adhered to and signed off on?
That's correct. So the drainage plan actually does cover parts 1 through 5. So there are drainage points on the much larger parcel as well. So the entire parcel has been signed off for drainage.
I guess my concern is in most situations where there's all this vacant land, either there's a secondary plan too, or the whole thing is laid out for lot drainage, so the accompanying next build conforms to the grand plan.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think what our engineering team might require, depending on the development, is that maybe updates to the grading plan should be made depending on the scale of the development, how much paving is going to be in place, that kind of thing. So there may be circumstances where an upgrade or an update to the grading plan may be required.
Right. And I guess the third one is, in many cases in Port Colborne, we have catch basins, but not necessarily storm sewers. But engineering signed off on this as far as the takeaway of the water. So actually, if I could I just ask the gentleman, do you live on the same side of the street?
The complex is right next door to my house, yes.
Okay, great. So that lot grading scheme, while under construction, there may have been flooding. The drainage engineer who did that has to ensure that the now finished grade does not spill over to any other property. It has to go to the street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm no expert in law grading, so I would presume that I know they have to do drain independently from one another, so that's, fortunately not an expert in them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Eric? All right, we'll go to Donna first then.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to David. I don't know if you have the answer to this because it's almost what Councillor Bruno was saying, but I'm just thinking about it, what you're saying, that the drainage plan was approved, and that's fine. It's approved and it should have been good and everything else, but if it's not working, then I feel like it has to be corrected and it shouldn't be up to the resident. We approved the plan, so therefore we should be sure that the plan's working at some point. So I guess I'm hearing what Gary said, that maybe we need to have the person who signed off on this, the drainage, going back and just double checking that once it is completed, that this gentleman's property is clear and free and it doesn't have drainage on it, like he's saying that it does. I don't know, but to say that it's signed off on and then the building happens and the drainage isn't right, that doesn't sound right to me either. So I'm not sure. Any thoughts on that, David?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I just kind of lost my train of thought. We'd have to check with our engineering department to see if there's any recourse for grading plans that are ineffective. I guess in short, I don't really know what the answer is because I don't review the grading plans. I don't know what the process is like. So if there is any recourse where our engineering team is able to make an amendment to their, approved site plan, that would be something I think we should look into for sure. But it's something that we'd have to discuss with staff.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. We definitely need to have a review of this plan and make sure that it's working the way that it was supposed to work. Because if it's not, we can't leave it like that. So anyway.
I'm going to go to Eric in a second. To the applicant, I see your hand up in your screen there. But to that point about the drainage, do you know if the lot has been leveled in accordance with the lot drainage plan at this point?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, that the conclusion that the lot grading plan is not working may be premature, simply because the final grades have not been established. And once the final grades are established and the building permit is signed off, the owner has to comply with and provide what are called the as-built. In other words, confirm that the drainage, when it's completed, is in compliance with the plan that was provided at the building permit stage. So we are at a point now where final grades have not been established, but when they are, the owner will have to certify through his surveyor, through the process called as-built, that final grading complies with the plan. So we might be a little premature in terms of concluding the plan is wrong. It may just be too early for the plan to be working the way it was designed to work. The second thing I would say is that it might help you understand the concept for the entire parcel of land. The balance of the property is going to be developed by draft plan approval. There's an engineering firm, there's a independent planner now working on the planning justification report, and it will be a complete plan of subdivision with stormwater management plans and all of the things that you go through when you do a plan of subdivision. The 4-townhouse unit on Omer is a one-off. That's the only pre-construction before the balance of the land is developed. I hope that helps with respect to the drainage part of it, because I know that there is final grading to be done. If that doesn't resolve the problem, then I think the owner should, my client should be working with engineering to correct the problem, because clearly it's not appropriate, nor it's just not appropriate for or legal for the property owner, our property owner, to be for the grading not to be effective and to be flooding the next door neighbor. That's the whole purpose of the stormwater management plan and grading plans. And if it turns out that it's not working, then we would work with the city to fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That's what I wanted to hear.
Thank you.
Eric? Good. I don't normally do this, but if you have a quick question, I will just, if you can come up to the side and keep it brief and to the point.
What's given to me is the drainage thing, with you asking your questions. So I'm Colin Warner from 63 Omer Avenue. In regards of everybody's asking what I said with the drainage, what I was told by the city to this development is, yes, the developer has to maintain, the city has laid out a drainage system, and that, but to this present time, no, the developer does not have to put proper drainage in. And what I'm asking is, my concern is because of what I've went through so far with this development flooding my property, is all the damage has been done to my property now, and I've asked the city who foots the bill for this, for any repairs to my property. They're telling me it's my problem. So I'm asking the city in this matter is, can they please correct this issue as it goes, so other people on this street and myself as this development goes on do not get further damage to their property.
Okay, let me stop you there. First of all, this committee is not the city.
Okay.
We're just a separate tribunal to adjudicate over the severances.
Yes,
So
yeah.
I know the majority of the members are councillors, and I'm sure they're hearing your comments. I will say that if you do have a drainage issue, and again, this is kind of separate from the discussion here, then it's to take it to City Hall. And even though maybe the final grading plan isn't there, at no point is any property supposed to drain on another property. And if it is being adversely affected based on construction or whatever, then you can start there, but unfortunately it becomes a civil matter after that point between parties. But
Yes, and that's my concern, is saying, can
Yes.
the city, as a development goes on, I get it, yes, you're not part
I
of the
can't
city.
comment on the city's part. All I can comment is on our part. So
Yes,
it looks like the requirements from our perspective have been addressed. The unfortunate part is we can't do anything more with regards to that aspect of it.
Okay,
All right?
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? There's no other delegations online or anything like that for this particular application? I do have a question with regards to the conditions of the severance. And let me just give me a brief second here. So with regards to, I think it was condition 3 in the staff report that talks about the mutual drain agreement to be registered on title that ensures continued operation and maintenance of the rear yard swale. I understand that part. Is there not or does there not need to be a mutual agreement for access for the two middle properties from either end to be able to access their backyards through the adjacent property owners? So that way, if they need to get to their backyard for whatever reason, to put a lawnmower in the backyard to cut the grass, they're not dragging it through their house, they can gain access through the side yards.
Gee, Mr. Chair, yeah, that's a good point.
Would that not have to be a requirement to be registered on title as well? So that way, the middle property owner can still get to their rear yard
Right.
via access up the side yards on the ends and get into the middle.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if that would be something more easement related than mutual agreement. It's a good question.
If I might, to the applicant, is that something that's typically addressed in these agreements or registered on title with regards to access to rear yards?
I'm trying to think of different developments where that has been employed. The two or three most recent ones I've been involved with are in St. Catharines, Jacob's Landing, and Vineyard Estates. And in those particular townhouse developments, the interior lots did not have access. In one of the cases, it actually was a rear garage door that would allow it. In the other ones, the property owner or the respective purchasers were advised of that particular potential deficiency, and that was the purpose of having a shed in the backyard to store your lawnmower. It's not a requirement. It may have been a pretty good marketing or a sales feature, but it's not a requirement under either, in my knowledge and experience, it's not a requirement of either the zoning bylaws or in the ultimate plan of subdivision that we put on the property. It's not a requirement. It may be somewhat of a minor inconvenience, but it's not necessary.
I don't know, I would respectfully disagree with you there. Someone wants to build a shed in their backyard or cut their grass and they can't get their lawnmower to the backyard because everyone puts up fences. How did they access their backyard?
Yeah, well, I think the point is that the lawnmower would be stored in the shed in the backyard.
Okay, how do you get it to the backyard if there's already fences up?
I hope you. That's speculative. I suppose that would be up to the property owner. But in any event, as I said, it's not a technical requirement nor a Planning Act consideration in terms of the severance.
Well, in all due respect, I think I would request that be a condition of the severances, that an easement agreement, however it gets worded, that the two center properties can have access through the side yards into the rear yard so they can gain access to their backyard for, I'm not saying on a daily basis, but on occasion for maintenance, or say for instance they got to do some repair work on their house and they need an excavator. They would obviously have to remedy the side yards if they do damage, but I don't know how else you would access their rear yard with regards to that if they don't have permission to cross people's lawn. Obviously, if you have the good neighbors, it's not an issue, but there's always that case where you don't have a good neighbor and you should still have that right to get to your backyard.
I was going to say, there is another suggestion, and because the lands to the north are going to be developed by way of plan of subdivision, it may be possible to create some form of easement through the rear that way in the plan of subdivision. But in order to create easements today on the applications that are before you, you can't create that by way of a condition in the decision without the applicant having to come back and actually sever the easement itself. There'd have to be a separate severance application to create those easements. So we would have to come back and do that at a later date. But as I said, I don't think that is a condition that's required by either the bylaw or by the Planning Act. But
Eric?
I guess through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant or Chris, could we not have a blanket easement be put on the lot without having to come to the committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that depends on the nature of the easement, not so much the size of it. I believe that coming to the committee for an easement for 21 years and over is required. If it's less so, I don't think they need to come. So I don't think it's a matter of the size of the easement. It's more of it being in perpetuity.
Okay. I'm a firm believer that you should have access to your backyard. If you build a townhouse, that should have been considered at the start. Otherwise, I don't know how else you access your rear yard if you need to do repairs, fill in the blank. The applicant had mentioned that if the garages kind of went right through and you had a garage door open, then all means you have now access to your backyard. And if you tend to block it up in the future, then you do that at your own peril. But in this particular case, I don't know, there should still be some other mutual agreement, whether it's an easement or just an agreement. Like I said, it's not to be used on a regular basis. However, to me, they should have access to their rear yards, especially since it sounds like other development going on around them that at some point their backyard will be enclosed and they won't have access to it. So I will be asking to add that as a condition, that whether it, like I say, be a mutual agreement, if that works, or if an easement needs to be done and they need to come for an easement, then they have to come for an easement. Either way, I think that needs to be a condition that's added to these substances. So with that, Gary?
So through you to the applicant, is there, in going by the property, I don't recall whether from the front goes through the back, i.e. through the garage, like I'm talking about a regular door, not a garage door at the back. So the garage is at the front. Is there a way to access? Well, I'm assuming there is a way to access the backyard. Did see doors at the back, but I didn't know whether that is. I guess it's about what you want to carry through your house to get to your backyard. Otherwise, you have to have a way around the outside. But I'm assuming that then that's also even the building code and the fire code is going to ensure that there's another egress or entrance through to the backyard. I don't know if people who live in a townhouse take their stuff through their house to get to the backyard if it's closed. But I guess I'm more concerned with if there's a way of doing that. Now, the applicant has talked about, because the adjoining property is going to be under draft plan, there is the opportunity to make either an alleyway, a walkway, or an easement. And I guess we can't really impose that on the draft plan, because the draft plan isn't in front of us and hasn't even started, and it could change. So do you know, as the applicant's agent, whether there is a way through to the backyard for something like a lawnmower?
No, I think the chairman is absolutely right, that in order to get a lawnmower to the backyard, you would have to carry it through your living room. There isn't in the floor plans for the two internal units and for the end units. There isn't access to the backyard through the two internal units without going through the house. It's that's a simple fact. The block has been constructed in compliance with two important planning documents. First, of course, the first one is the Planning Act, and it complies with all the provisions, setbacks, etc., in the zoning bylaw, but also it complies with the building code. And the building code does not require that there be the type of access that the chairman and I think would be a good practical idea, but it's not a requirement. And in my view, that wouldn't be an appropriate condition to impose. If the committee decides to impose that condition, then I think they should add to it perhaps that it would have to be to the satisfaction of planning staff, so that it could be worked out with the applicant and planning. But to be clear, our position is that it's not an appropriate condition, because it's not a building permit requirement, it's not a zoning requirement, nor is it a requirement under the Planning Act that be provided. And there are many developments that do not have that type of access. And Jacob's Landing in St. Catharines on the Water is one we've just finished, and it's exactly the same situation as this. The internal units, the garages do not extend through to the backyard. There are living quarters behind the garage. So that's a common design. In any event, those are my comments.
Thank you. Angie?
Thank you. Through you, Dan. Well, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Dan, and what you would like to do here. I would agree, though, that it is not necessarily something we should be putting in place. I think it is a very strong statement about the quality of the building and about whether or not you'd actually want to live there. But it's certainly not, considering it's not required in any of the acts, it's probably not something that we could put in place. But we should be looking at this in the future as, making sure that buildings are built in a way that people will really want to use them. Because I would not want to have to carry a lawnmower through my living room, nor would I have to want to have two lawnmowers, one for the front yard, one for the backyard. And, God forbid something should happen to the back of my home, and how would I be able to get that fixed? So it really is, not having a way back there is a problem, but I don't know that it's a problem that we can solve in this situation. So I just leave that with you.
Let me ask this of Chris. Condition 3, the mutual agreement drain registered on title, is that a condition of or a requirement of the Planning Act with regards to severances or variances or the building code?
To you, Mr. Chair, not to my knowledge, it's a requirement of the Planning Act. It was a recommendation made by our engineering team.
So with regards to that, we have an opportunity here to remedy a potential problem going forward. I think we should take that opportunity to try to remedy that situation now. Obviously, if it's not a requirement of the Planning Act, fine. I would say I don't see why it would be part of the building code in the sense that typically deals with buildings. We're just talking about access to rear yard. So I will still stand that either one end or one end to the next one over should have access. So I don't know which of those two applications would be, whether it's 15 and 18 or I don't know, what are the two end ones?
15 and 18.
15 and 18? So on those two particular ones, the condition be added that a mutual agreement be established and registered on title, that those two inner lots have access on occasion to gain access to their backyard for maintenance or otherwise. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. It could be a matter of just adding a gate in the fence on either side so they can come through if they need to come through with something. I'm not saying that, it would prohibit fencing or anything like that. It could be a double lock fence and you have to go and knock and make sure that it's a mutual time frame. They just can't walk across someone's backyard unannounced, but they should have the right to, with proper notice, to gain access to their backyard. Anyway, so with that, is there any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Oh, Gary?
In your recommendation, is that within the retained footprint of the property?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Basically, it would just be permission, agreed to permission that I can cross over your property on occasion to access my backyard for maintenance, whatever. I do know my brother-in-law, he lives in Ottawa, he lives in a townhouse complex, he's the N1, and he has to give access to everyone that's in the middle. It's part of their agreement, there's a gate on each fence going across, and if they need to gain access, he has to grant it to them. Now, they can't just walk across his yard, they have to give notice and say, hey, I need to come into your backyard to cross into my backyard, blah, 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 and make arrangements, but they do have that right to do that. So with that, any other questions or comments? Is there anything further that the applicant would like to add at this time?
Yes, looking at the concept plan for the development of the balance of the property, one of the most effective ways to give the committee what is obviously concerned about is to create that access from the adjoining lands to the north. It doesn't have to be a 6 or 8 meter easement. It could be the standard 3 meter easement, but it could, if it were on the lands to the north, then it wouldn't affect this particular development. So I think perhaps you could word the condition broadly enough that the applicant provide to the internal units a means of access satisfactory to the planning committee or satisfactory to the city or something of that nature, and leave us the option of creating it in the next stage of the development. And it could be created very early on by simply severing that piece out and attaching or including it in the draft plan approval or whatever. But we would like the flexibility of being able to do it that way.
I'm open to that flexibility. The only concern that I have is that I don't know how long it's going to take for you to get through that secondary plan on the other part, whether you could be able to do it within 2 years to comply with this, because it will become a requirement or a condition that needs to be met within 2 years on these properties to be able to gain your severance.
Well, I understand that, but I think that if time did become an issue, we would be able then to come back to the committee with a severance application to create, to sever off and attach to the lands to the south that particular access alleyway at the back. So we do have the option of shortening the time up by going that way.
100%.
I think the flexibility should be extended to us as a courtesy.
I'm all for flexibility, and if that can be addressed in some fashion that gains mutual access to the back, I'm all for that. So we can word that to how, like I say, if it can be done with just a mutual agreement registered on title, that's fine. Instead of an easement in perpetuity, I'm not for making things more difficult, but as long as there's a way that those two inner properties will have access to their rear yards, that's all I'm looking for. So with that, any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Do we have someone that wants to be long-winded and read all of these? If you can bear with me, I will move the two outer ones to start with. I just got to get them on my screen here. Oops. And Sam, you said it was 15 and 18? Yeah. Okay. It's 15. So I will move application B 15-22-PC, the lands legally known as Plan 3 lots, 17, 18, 21 to 31 in municipality known as 59 Omer Avenue, that consent application B 15-22-PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 9th, 2022, with the addition of condition 6 being a mutual agreement and or easement agreement satisfactory to the planner with regards to gaining access through to what's the two middle parts? Is it part 2 and part 3, or in this case if it's just part 2, if you can figure out the wording for that, to be registered on title. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial polity statement and conforms to the growth plan of the Greater Golden Horseshoe and regional official plans, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaws 65, 75, 30, 18 as amended. And is 16 exactly the same, the wording? Let me read 16.
The conditions would be slightly different.
18. That's 18. 18. And I will also move application B18-22-PC, the lands legally known as Plan 3 lots 17, 18, 21 through 21, municipally known as 49 Over Avenue, that consent application B18-22-PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 9th, 2022, with the addition of condition 6, previously worded, to gain access through to the center lot adjacent to the left of that. For the following reasons, that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will comply with the provisions of zoning bylaws 6575/30/18 as amended. If I get a seconder to that, Eric? Questions or comments? All those in favor? Be granted. So that's 15 and 18. Does anyone want to take 16 and 17? Eric? Thank you.
Is it B16 and B17?
B16 and B17, correct.
So regarding applications B16-22-PC and B17-22-PC, the lands legally known as Plan 3, Lots 17, 18, 21 to 31, municipally known as 59 Omer Avenue. That consent applications B16-22-PC and B17-22-PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 9th, 2022. For the following reasons, the applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Seconder to that. Gary? Angie, did you catch the last part?
I did not.
So we moved 16 and 17. Do you have any questions or comments to 16 or 17? B16?
No, not at all.
Okay. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. How they carry. And then the two variances, A25 22PC and A26-22 PC. Donna, can you?
I have to bring them up on my phone, so just 1 second. So 22 and 26 I'm looking for, right? No, 25 and 26, sorry. Can I do them together?
You can. Do you have them there? Or?
Yeah, I do. I just have to pull them up because I don't have them on my other computer's not here. Application A2522PC in the matter of the Planning Act RSO 1990 for the lands legally known as Plan 3, Lots 17, 18, 21 to 31 in the municipality known as 59 Omer Avenue. That a minor variance application A2522PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature as the reduction in the lot area will not negatively impact the subject parcel. It is appropriate for development of the site as the dwelling is currently existing and the severance is being sought to facilitate the sale of each townhouse unit. It is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw as the zoning bylaw permits townhouse dwellings in the R4 zone. The proposal meets the majority of the lot creation requirements and the existing dwelling will meet all the required setbacks. And number 4, it is desirable and in compliance with the general purpose of the official plan as townhouse dwellings are permitted in the urban residential designation. And then for number 26, application A2622DC, and in the matter of the lands legally known as Plan 3, Lots 17, 18, 21 to 31, in the municipality known as 59 Omer Avenue. The minor variance application A2622PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature and the reduction in lot area will not negatively impact the subject parcel. Number 2, it's appropriate for development of the site as the dwelling is currently existing and the severance is being sought to facilitate the sale of each townhouse unit. Number 3, it's desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, as in the zoning bylaw permits townhouse dwellings in the R4 zone. The proposal meets the majority of the creation requirements of the existing dwelling, will meet all the required setbacks. It is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as townhouse dwellings are permitted in the urban residential designation.
Thank you. Seconder to that? Gary? Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Just before the applicant leaves, you might want to go back to the owner and see if you can address some of these drainage issues, if you can, prior to getting to that final grading plan, just to keep things kosher with your neighbors. But with that, there is, as you know, a 20-day waiting period, and like I said, I hope we can come to a very simple agreement that satisfies that requirements. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure we can. Thank you.
All right, that concludes the applications this evening. Other business. Does anyone have any other business? Eric.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Chris. So the parkland dedication aspect, why is it that we don't we don't always ask it for any new parcel that's being created, do we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we typically try to. Parkland has been a point of contention lately because our bylaw needs reworking, and that's what we're kind of working towards. With regards to the last application there, parkland dedication is something that is required at the time of the building permit. I didn't check with the building department to see if it was paid. I just, under the assumption that it was built, so it should have been paid.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with it being like a requirement for building permit. I always thought it was at a planning stage, because I thought it was more of a planning act requirement, not a building requirement.
You are right to think that.
Okay.
It is, and that's what part of our update to the parkland bylaw. I want to add it as a condition of the consent to say that they either have to pay, or that they have to pay as a condition of the consent.
So in our official plans, say 5% in lieu of parkland dedication?
It does say 5%, yeah.
Okay. And we want to move towards doing that for every new subject parcel?
Not sure yet.
Okay.
Some municipalities do a flat rate. Some do the 5%. It kind of varies a little bit, so we need to do a bit more research.
So I'm familiar with it being like, for most severances that I'm involved with other municipalities, it's like a guaranteed every subject parcel 5%. They're required to get an appraisal. If the city's satisfied with that appraisal, 5% of that appraised value is what they owe to the city.
Right.
So that I think should go on moving further. Like, I mean, and I guess I'm talking as a councillor there. But that is something that the city misses out on a lot of money that way, which can go to parks, right? That's the whole point of it, is to in lieu of parkland, right? Because every severance application, when you're creating new lots, there's that whole parkland aspect. So,
right. And through you, Mr. Chair, it's not that it doesn't get paid; it does get collected. It just gets collected at a later date. My issue with it is that someone creates a lot and then goes and sells the lot. They don't have to declare to the purchaser that parkland dedication is required. So a lot of times people come and they go to build a house and they get slapped with this huge fee that they weren't aware of. So I would rather it be a condition of the consent to say that the person severing it needs to pay, as a condition.
I didn't know that. That you're right. That seems really odd.
Yeah.
Gary?
I remember the day when it was that way, and the city believed that it didn't get the 5% on the best value of the property. But you said a word in there that wasn't raised before, and that was appraisal. So what used to happen is it would be paid at the time when it was at its lowest value, or a value that the applicant said it was worth. And so that's when they went to at time of building permit. And the other one was, some people did the severance and held on to it for 10 years and then went to build. Now, they paid it, but they kind of paid it at 10-year ago rates, which I guess if you had the appraisal in that thing, you could head that off and get a true value of a now rezoned property, serviced, et cetera. Although I don't know if servicing might not happen then, and does that give it a higher value?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think it would be, I mean, I'm no appraiser.
Yeah.
To be putting in services on a vacant lot, it's kind of
Not good
redundant.
increase.
But yeah, the appraisal is part of the Planning Act requirement, and it's good for up to a year right now. So if you get the appraisal, it's good for a year. After that expires, can't use that appraisal anymore for parkland.
So the appraisal comes after the consent
Yeah.
has been granted?
Yeah.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, but before final consent, obviously, because it's a condition. And the appraisal would take into factors such as the zoning of the lot, the servicing of the lot, and all adjacent lots and their market value that are comparable in price. So
That'd have
that's,
to be developed in the
yes, so they
policy.
go in there. Another aspect of these appraisals, they typically look at development fees, and they deduct the development fees from the appraised value. So that could be a point of contention within the city, because those can be inflated a little bit. But that's something that can be dealt with. The city can determine how it wants to do that, but it has to be kind of mentioned in the official plan. And the official plan will be reviewed soon, because the Niagara Regional Official Plan has passed. So the city should definitely look at that.
Anybody else got any other new business? Do you have some?
Well, there's just one other thing. I also brought up on that one application the laterals, right, crossing. That is typically in other municipalities. That's a comment that comes from engineering. So I'm not sure. It's just something that I think engineering should have in mind, or we, when we grant these consents, should have in mind, because it could be like laterals should not be crossing property lines at all. So I don't know what happens in the event that a lateral does cross a property line, and because that would be found out during demolition. If a property is being removed and they have to remove the lines, I'm assuming when demolition is done here in Port Colborne, we have an inspector go out and do a final inspection of the demolition to make sure that it's done completely right, and in which case they'll know whether or not there is lines.
Yeah, that's something that I'll have to talk with engineering staff about on their review of the applications.
I'm curious about our staff's opinion.
Thank you. Gary?
I know
Gary,
that we had gone with separate laterals to everything, but like in these, like particularly Stanley tonight, so because there was, well, I don't know, if there's no knowledge that a semi's going to go there, then the subdivider's lateral could have been just singular, right?
Potentially, but I don't believe the lateral would be in place until they establish what they're planning on building. So if the lot's vacant and then they go and plan for a detached dwelling, then one single lateral would be installed, right?
So like, to the gentleman's point, he bought Stanley. The city knew it was R2, right? So we would have known, we would have been able to tell the developer in his draft plan of subdivision would have had to have shown two laterals then?
I don't believe in the draft plan of subdivision at that point would be required.
Okay. But at the time of constructions of services, perhaps?
I think it's more of the time of building permit, I think.
Yeah. It'd be no different if you had a vacant lot that's not serviced and you gotta get it serviced.
So it'd be interesting if that, yeah, but that was a serviced subdivision.
Yeah.
So they'd have to drop another service in.
Yeah,
after
they're
the
gonna
fact.
change what they're gonna build, yeah. It's gotta match whatever they're building, right?
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah, and it's on the onus of the owner, the applicant, to install those laterals. It's not,
Okay.
it wouldn't be the city's responsibility to be installing laterals on potential lots. If it's R2, it could be severed. Even if it's a big R1 lot, it could be severed, right? You could make 2 R1 lots.
Well, yeah, but in subdivision, we
Right.
wouldn't be installing the laterals whether there was 1 or 2.
Right.
The developer would.
Eric?
In regards to draft plans, I'm pretty sure there would be a condition of draft plan of subdivision, not to bring a lot grading plan, right? There's usually a draft plan of subdivision would have a grading plan created, and usually when you're doing those grading plans, you're doing a grading and servicing plan, I believe. Unless I'm focusing more on site plan, but in my mind, I usually see both of them together. So I would think that there may have been some conceptual servicing plan, but no, I honestly, I can't say
Yeah, I
confidently.
think it depends on the scope of the project too. If it's
Maybe.
just a single detached dwelling, servicing plan's not usually required for it, but.
So my concern though with the laterals is more for older
Yeah.
neighborhoods where there's infill development occurring.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to see these, not necessarily not new subdivisions.
There's a lot of shared ones now.
Anyone else have any other new business? I only have one point. With the elections approaching, our committee is going to change at the end of the year. We currently have 2 applications that were deferred previously. I would like to make a motion that, based on our comments and discussion last month, that notices be sent for these 2 applications whenever they do happen to come to us, or any other deferred applications, that the notices be sent out. If there's no changes, obviously they don't know to go to agencies, but a sign and, is it 60 meters?
Yeah.
That they be notified of whatever that new date, whenever they happens to be set, that those notices be sent and put out there. So I'll put that motion on the floor if someone can second that. Gary, questions or comments? Yes, Gary second.
So, change in the committee. Would the new committee, upon the revisiting of the application, have to be briefed with everything that happened?
In these particular situations, the meeting has not started. So we haven't heard anything on these applications.
These are
Because they
ones
were
that are
deferred.
carrying over, okay.
Now, if they had been adjourned,
Sorry.
then there becomes
Yeah.
a bigger issue.
Okay.
Because
They're
then
not- They're not that.
you either have to, if there's someone left that was from the original meeting, they can continue to hear it. Otherwise, I'd have to start all over again.
Over again, yeah.
In that particular case, if there was no committee members to hear it. So, with that, yeah. But in this case here, they were deferred, so they haven't even been heard at all,
Okay.
so. It's just the notice period that, one dates back to, I think, May, and the other one was June, so they've been quite a while out there. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that was out there. So with that, the motion on the floor is for that. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that? That'll be carried. Thank you. So if there's no other new business, I will ask for a mover and a seconder of the minutes of the August 10th, 2022 meeting. Gary, Angie, any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. And with that, I will adjourn this hearing.